Good evening. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening to my fellow board members.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
And good evening to our town manager, Scott Crabtree. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Manager, Janice.
And Janice, our clerk.
Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, thank you. Our first order of business is under correspondence. We have the Irontown Diner, 327 Main Street, requesting extended hours on December 9th, 2023, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Good evening. Would you please come to the podium and give your name and address, please?
George Athanasopoulos, 325 Main Street, Saugus.
And you would like extended hours to
Yes.
serve liquor on December 9th.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it.
Do board members have any questions?
Madam Chair,
Selectman Ciccolini?
it's not a question. I think it's just more of a statement. I think we all share the same feeling. They've been a pillar in the community. No issues, no problems. I, for one, I think you run a top shelf establishment. I know you had change in ownership, management, and you guys have been seamless over
Awesome.
there. So I fully support this. If no board members have questions, I'll make a motion.
Any questions? Seeing none, Selectman Ciccolini?
I'll make a motion that we grant the request of Irontown Diner, 327 Main Street, for their extended hours on December 9th, 2023, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
And that's seconded by the chair. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Selectman Ciccolini's motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I concur with Selectman Ciccolini's
Thanks for the feedback.
words.
I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good luck.
Next, we have our tax hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Saugus Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing for the purpose of determining the percentage of a local tax levy fiscal year 2024 to be borne by each class of taxable property within the town of Saugus, Mass. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. We appreciate all the hard work that goes into this. And would you like to begin? Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Dave Riccadelli, 21 Columbus Ave, Board of Assessors. So the packet you have in front of you, I just wanted to go over a few highlights on setting the tax rate tonight. So if you turn to page 4, it's going to show you the new growth that we have: residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. So between the new housing and businesses and the utilities pay into that also for the commercial, the personal property. And the commercial was a lot of UPS on 107. That totals 1.6 million in additional revenue. And if you look down at the previous years, we're pretty much in line with last year. And every year is different because you don't know what new projects are going to be coming up. And the housing was a lot of the 2 apartment buildings on Route 1. So that contributed to that, and they have a few new houses in Saugus also, but it's the housing complexes mainly.
May I ask a question on page 4?
Sure.
Under personal property, what is the biggest component that is making up that increase?
That's your public utilities, like your gas company, your electric company. That's the majority of it. And then some of the equipment that's in the businesses also counts towards that. Like if you had say, for instance, if UPS went in and they put a lot of equipment in there after the fact, that's taxed. But it's mainly your utilities, National Grid, gas and electric.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Selectman Riley?
thank you good evening, Mr. Riccadelli.
Good evening.
I just have a question on the businesses. The businesses that are closed, does that affect the assessment, and if it does, how?
No, the tax revenue, you're saying if it's an empty building? You still get the tax revenue. Ivana will be up in a minute. She could speak on it more, but there is an income and expense that comes into play with that also. But after, she can give you more detail on that.
Okay.
based on the income of the business, but as far as the,
Yeah, just to, through you, Madam Chairman, just to sort of piggyback on that question. So that, like Massachusetts is different than other states. A lot of people don't understand that. So if something comes off, like, say, commercial, you talk about commercial, if something comes off, or the valuation comes down, then off of that building, it's the same. In other words, what people don't understand is that our levy goes up 2.5% plus new growth, et cetera, right? But the 2.5 goes up every single year, but it's capped at 2.5%. So everybody thinks, well, geez, my taxes will only go up 2.5%. You know what I mean? But that's not necessarily true because the valuations change from property to property. So what you have to understand is there's three different things that are working. It's the tax rate, because I've heard this comment, this kind of it talks about the same thing every time. We hear people say, well, you know, Swampscott's tax rate is lower than Saugus. Well, their tax rate might be lower, the actual rate, but the valuations are much higher. So that's why when they get into it, they'll talk a little bit more about average tax bills. Saugus has a very low average tax bill, meaning the valuations in correlation with the tax rate is what gives you your tax bill. So if valuations go really high, right, our tax rates, or even other communities, their tax rates will come down because it only can come up, say, 2.5%. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to go up 2.5%, because yours might go down in valuation based on sales and different factors, or it may go up 2%, or it may go up 6%. But it's 2.5% in the total levy. So if that helps make sense. So that's sort of like, that's why, like, when we do, and Jeff understands, when we do, we get surveillance calls for the bond companies, they look at Massachusetts differently, because in other communities like New Jersey, they have all different types of rules. So if the valuations come down, they have a problem with it, how much revenue they are able to deal with. If our valuations economically come down in Saugus or Massachusetts, it's balanced because the rate comes up. So if the valuations come down, so that the communities are still bringing in 2.5% increase on the levy each year for revenues. So it's more stable in Massachusetts, I think, than some other states in the country.
Madam Chairman, just to clarify, Mrs. Riley's, with her point, I think she was talking about a particular business. If it's out of operation for a year,
Right.
they can file for an abatement. I-1 will probably talk about it more. It would be based on their income and expense
Right.
report. I think that's what you were
Yeah,
talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
more good for the explanation, but I was just wondering if a business that's out, what's their role in being
But
able to
it's,
say, look.
it's still part
you
of the
know,
levy, though. It doesn't.
Correct.
If they get an abatement, they get
building.
an abatement. The levy is the levy.
So, and that's a good point. So understand, if they get an abatement and it lowers, the levy still goes up 2.5%, it just gets dispersed
To the
between
other
valuations
payers.
of the rest of that class.
Correct.
Whether it's residential or commercial.
Business.
That's the
So
reason
the
why
town
you have
is-
to have your abatements in by a certain date.
Right.
Because if they're granted, then they have to apply that abatement and spread it along the remaining taxpayers. But we don't lose the tax revenue per se.
Okay.
Correct.
So tax revenue, if we have no new growth, nobody builds a house, nobody builds a commercial property. If our tax revenue was $1 million last year, it's gonna go up by 2.5% on $1 million. If property values go up by more than 2.5%, then your rate's gonna come down to make the balance between the two go to 2.5%.
Would you mind coming up to the podium, please? Thank you. We all know who you are, but your name and address, please.
Good evening, Ivana Wild, 2 Bell Street, Ipswich, Massachusetts, Deputy
you.
Assessor. So just to be very clear, we do not value businesses, so we have absolutely nothing to do with the valuation of a business. It is strictly real estate, and I believe that's what you are referring to when you have an empty restaurant, for example, correct? So when we get the abatement, you would still have to show how the real estate has lost its value or it's overvalued. So if you take the business out of it, that's how we value properties. That's how we value real estate, strictly for the building only, not the business. There is a personal property that goes inside the business, which usually gets removed when the business moves out of the building. The building stays the same. So unless the building itself lost value by depreciation if there was a roof leak because it's been empty for a year, nobody's keeping up with it. There might be other adjustments. We could go out on an inspection. They can file, but again, they will be just strictly for the building. We do not value businesses.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
So not the
I just wanted to make sure that we get
Yep.
that, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
not the complicated, but we have personal property tax, which is.
Personal
some-
property
right.
is a movable property, so
Correct.
if you have an office, you're gonna move in with a few computers and a desk and a chair.
Right.
That's what we call personal property. Again, completely different aspect from the actual business, because you can have a small business with 5 people in it. It could be valued at millions of dollars.
Correct.
But that is not us, that is not the assessors.
Okay.
We'll value what's inside the building, computers, chairs, desks, TVs, et cetera, and then we'll take that out and value just the building. Okay?
Very good, thank you.
You're
Question, Madam
welcome.
Chairman.
Everybody, thank you.
Selectman Cogliano.
Thank you. A question to you. So we have $40 million in new personal property growth.
Correct.
So when you take into account Sears and Sears Automotive and all those places that are gone, so that's 40 million additional to what we had before? Is that just 40 million new that came in this year?
So
Not-
that is just, that is additional. That is additional new growth, so it's something new that came onto the tax roll that was not there last year.
Okay.
And over 20 million is the public utilities, which is our 504. And those are actually valued by the state. They are no longer valued by us or companies that we might possibly hire for personal property. And that is in itself just over 20 million in growth. Another big one is Verizon. That's huge as well. And then everything else will be any other commercial, new commercial that brings in the personal property within. That's kind of how it usually happens. Personal property is part of the commercial.
Thank you very much.
And that could be just restaurants updating too. It really is everything that goes inside the building.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask you a question too, please. Let's make believe you have an apartment building, and the apartment building has 100 units. Don't you send out income and expense forms to owners, and they have to fill it out? So if they have, let's make believe half of them go vacant for some unknown reason, wouldn't you adjust based on that income form?
Yes, we do. We do.
Okay.
But it is just like with real estate, we are always behind. So for fiscal '24, which we are in now, we look back at 2022 calendar year information. So we are always just a little behind.
Sure.
Because we need for the calendar year to close, we collect the forms, then we do data entry, then we do analysis. So we need that time. But yes, we do adjust for vacancy, of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for board members? Dave, would you like to continue, please?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to move from page 4 to page 8. In here, we have the proposed tax rate, if you guys choose to shift the 175% max, that would put a lot of the tax burden on the commercial businesses in town and off the residential. And as the town manager was stating before, since we're bringing in more, the tax rate actually goes down. It goes down to $10.65 per thousand, $10.65 per thousand, if it shifts the max. And it just gives you some various, illustrations of the max and what it would be if you didn't shift. And then if we move to page 9, and the best barometer of basically isn't the tax rate, it's the average tax bill. In the column on the bottom, the average tax bill in Saugus is $6,363. And it's giving you the various, we gave you the towns that border Saugus, even though some of them, aren't that similar to Saugus, but, if you can see, look at Linfield and the surrounding towns and Wakefield, you get a good value in Saugus. Probably a lot of it has to do with the shift and, the other factors. The new growth helps every year also in Saugus. Up the top column, you can see what the commercial rate is versus last year's rate of $11.26 per thousand. Then if we move to page 10, it shows you what the increase would be in taxes for this proposal. The increase would be $218 from last year's bill to this year's bill,
On an average bill.
on an average, yeah, average tax bill in Saugus. And like Mr. Chickenley was saying before, you know, basically the 2.5, if we raised $100 million last year, we can raise 102.5 million, and then plus the new growth. So the new growth helps out a lot. So basically, we're asking you guys to vote on the tax shift, and if you have any additional questions,
And you didn't add the good news, is, right? That they-
Excuse me?
You didn't add the good news, is that if they vote this tonight, they can go out tomorrow and tell them when they lowered the tax rate in Saugus.
yeah, yeah, technically they did.
Tax rate has been lowered by the Board of Selectmen.
Yep, big headline.
Headlines.
So yeah, since we have the extra revenue, like you say, it would go from 1126 down to whatever was 1065. So if you have any additional questions, Ivana's here.
So, Mr. Riccadelli, do we have, I never remember us, the Board of Selectmen, not voting for the maximum shift.
As long as I can remember, you guys have always opted for the 1.75 because it puts more of the burden on the businesses and less on the residential homeowners.
Correct, because we want to keep, without our robust commercial inventory that we have, our tax rate would be significantly higher.
Absolutely. Like you see in Linfield and other towns that don't have that, you know, it would be a lot higher.
Madam Chairman.
Selectman Sereno?
If we just went with a standard tax rate for businesses and residential, it'd be $12.60. But we were shifting, if we shift for the 175% maximum, then that $12.60 of residential will go down to $10.65. I was looking through my file cabinet.
$1,000, about
I was-
$1,000 a year savings.
I was looking through my tax records.
Thank you.
1982 was the first year that the Saugus adopted the maximum shift, and we've been shifting the maximum 175% since 1982. That was the first year that was allowed for communities to do that. And I have the tax rate in 1981, before we were allowed to shift. Our tax rate was $66.20
Really?
per thousand.
Wow.
Yeah, before the shift.
Yeah, but the houses were worth.
So the houses are
30
worth a lot,
grand.
right. Like you said, you got to look at the value
Right.
too, and that comes into play.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the way I've always looked at it, is I look at a baseline of no shift would be $2 per thousand more. And if the
Yeah.
average house is worth roughly $600,000, it's about $1,200 a year.
Yeah.
The residential tax homeowner would pay more, about $1,200 on an average home in Saugus if we didn't have any shift at all.
Correct, yeah.
And, you know, obviously, there's a huge benefit.
Gives the
But
taxpayers
it
more
also does
value.
put the burden on the commercial tax base. So that's something that we have to just remain mindful of year to year as we're trying to fill up properties on Route 1, and as new businesses are coming in, we just want to make sure we keep mindful that it's still a reasonable average tax rate that they're paying. And I've seen them fluctuate around that $22, even in my tenure on the board. I've seen that rate be up in the 20s for commercial. So it's not new for it to break.
Yeah,
$20.
23, you know, per thousand, it's, you know, a little more than double the residential, so I mean.
Are there any other questions that board members have for either Dave or anybody from the Board of Assessors this evening? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the board?
Madam Chair,
Selectman Chicalini?
this is a public hearing, so I will make a motion that we close the public hearing.
The chair will second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Selectman Chicalini's motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 5-0. Selectman Chicalini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make a motion that the board vote for the minimum residential factor MRF to be shift to the maximum of 175% and adopt a minimum residential factor of 0.845101.
And that's seconded by the chair.
This is for tax year 2024.
And that's seconded by the chair. Is there further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Selectman Chicalini's motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I want to thank the assessors.
thank you.
office.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you.
you,
Thank
thank
you
you
very
all for your presentation. I know how much work this is, and thank you all for coming tonight. Selectman Serena?
Thank you, Luana, Tracy, Jean, Dave, and
Jen.
And Jen. I call her
Jen.
Jean. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
With that said, the last item on the agenda for citizens' comments, is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the board? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the board?
Wait,
We have,
Nobody can hear.
citizens' comments, does
My-
anyone want to make a citizen?
Would anybody like to speak? Was there something you would like to bring up this
come
evening?
up to the podium, sir.
Yeah.
It'll be posted on our website.
Yeah.
So we have to wait till after the meeting's over, and find out what we did.
What we did, sir, what we did tonight is we shifted, we don't come up with the tax rate, the Board of Selectmen does not come up with the tax rate, but what we do, what we are responsible for is the shift between residential and commercial. And what we did tonight, our vote was to shift the maximum amount, which is 175% of the tax burden, to commercial to keep residential as low as possible. That was the vote that was taken.
And what I was saying, so that you, just to reiterate, if we didn't shift any and we left it flat, the average tax bill for a residential home in Saugus would be $1,200 a year more. By shifting, it saves the average homeowner in Saugus $1,200.
$10.65. Sorry.
$10.65 per thousand. That's going to be the new rate. It actually went down. The rate went down per thousand. Okay?
If you would like, sir, after the meeting, I'd be more than happy to give you my copy of the presentation, because it will be online shortly. You're welcome. Sir, would you mind very much if you have something to address us, because we can't hear you up at the podium, please? And if you could please give your name and address, please? Thank you.
My address and name, do I have to?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Martha DeMayo, and I live at 419 Essex Street. Thank you. I've been living there for 13 years, about. I know when I first moved in, the property tax would be paid, but every year since then, every single year, they've gone up. And it's like I'm paying like double now of what I was paying when I first moved in. So that's why, and where's the whole town? I see there's like 4 of us from the town. Where is everybody? You know, if I didn't read the Advocate, I wouldn't have known this meeting was taking place,
Well, it was posted. It was a public hearing.
you know?
This is typical.
I didn't know. It's my
Yeah.
first time. I'm like, I'm a homeowner.
Yeah.
I like to find out what's going on in the city, you know?
It's nice that
That's
you're,
all.
at least you're involved. I like
Yeah,
that.
that's why I just want to get involved. You know, I'm Italian.
Are you interested in any volunteer positions to get involved? Okay, well, we
Well,
can talk to
the-
you after the meeting.
The tax rate in 2023, right now, is $11.26 per thousand, and in 2024, it's going to go down to $10.65 per thousand. However, the prices of homes have been going up, and on average, the estimate is that the taxes will probably go up for the year $218.15, based on the analysis from our Board of Assessors. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board? Seeing none, what are the wishes
Did you want to, back in the rear, did you want to speak? Ma'am? Yeah, no? Madam Chair,
Selectman Chicalini.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
That's seconded by the chair. All those in favor of Selectman Chicalini's motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I hope everyone shows up for the tree lighting on Friday from 5 to 8. Thank you. Good night.